Hi, welcome everyone to our discussion today about the rise of the Flex-enabled broker. Thank you to everyone dialing in today from all over the world. We've got quite a global audience here today. My name is Mike LaRosa. I'm the VP of Channel Partnerships here at Upflex. I support and grow our referral and white label partnerships with firms such as Newmark, Cushman, Avison Young, Colliers, and a few others. If you're not familiar with Upflex, we're a SaaS platform bringing together a global network of flexible workspaces, simple and secure booking technology, and powerful data and insights for CRE for professionals, occupiers, and space operators alike. We help make hybrid work more manageable, more cost-effective, and more sustainable for everyone in this flex workspace ecosystem. Welcome to our webinar again. We are going to take about another minute or so for everyone to dial in. Just so you all know, all attendees are going to be receiving a copy of the recording after this discussion today. And we welcome you all to drop your questions into the chat. We'll for sure be taking a few minutes at the end of this discussion to kind of see which questions we've got going on and to answer them. I'll be introducing my guests momentarily. In that time, just wanted to set the tone and share a little bit about today's discussion and kind of the inspiration and the motivation behind it. Occupiers of all sizes rely on the expertise of CRE professionals to find the right workspace, and that's especially true now when the very concept of the office is being completely reimagined. Occupiers are looking for more flexibility and control when it comes to their workspace, and we hope that this webinar will help you all learn a little bit more as we explore solutions that are helping occupiers keep up with this change. I think as we're coming up onto Q4 2022, which means we're very close to 3 years since COVID-19 really radically changed the way the world works, it's no secret that most companies are finally embracing some form of hybrid work, right? They've been kicking the can down the road since probably the summer of 2020, and we're now hearing that as many as 70% or more corporate clients are adopting flexible work policies. At Upflex, we've been working closely with brokers to design customized solutions for their corporate clients. And today I'm joined by Upflex partners from Cushman and Wakefield and Avison Young to discuss the rise of flex tech, or as it's been coined, flexible technology, which is enabling the future of advisory for CRE professionals. One last note before jumping into introductions, we've got a poll that we're going to open up with right now, asking you all a question about how you best manage client requests for a flex workspace. Please do take a moment to answer that, and we'll be diving back into that a little bit later in the discussion. Okay, we're 3 minutes in, and it's finally time to introduce our guests. I am so excited to host the discussion with them, not just because I'm passionate, interested about flex workspace, but because today these two guests of mine are not just industry colleagues and channel partners, but also friends. Jillian and I actually first met when I was running a space of my own in DC way back in 2014. So it's so exciting to kind of be able to have folks that are both very experienced in the industry, and hopefully we'll keep this a lively conversation for you all. I'm so grateful to both Jillian and Christine for taking the time to join us, not just because of their unique experiences, but also because of where they sit within each of their organizations. I trust you all will understand why we've titled this discussion, The Rise of the Flex-Enabled Broker, as soon as they introduce themselves. We're going to start off alphabetical order. Christine Wyckoff from Cushman and Wakefield, welcome aboard. If you wouldn't mind starting off, could you just share a little bit about your experience within the industry, the roles that you've played, and take it away.
Thank you, Mike. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Christine Wyckoff from Cushman and Wakefield. I have been in this industry perhaps longer than some folks have been in the workforce post-college, and I will admit that now, and I'm okay with it. This was really the only career I've had. I've started in the flex sector when it was called Executive Suites in 2001. About 2 weeks after 9/11 in New York. So kind of got thrown into things at a brand called HQ Global Workplaces, which was evolved and purchased by Regis, and really learned that out there in the universe, here's these environments where people were renting offices, entrepreneurs, small businesses who needed a place to work who couldn't get a full floor, right? They didn't have the money for it. So I was selling that, working with brokers back then, and then my role evolved into Regis as director of corporate accounts, and I worked on accounts in New York for a very long time when we were still selling one seat, one office, one person, an executive desk, chair, old school brown furniture, and the thought of using Flex, which we didn't call it Flex then, it was serviced offices, the thought of having that for something other than that use case, meaning we didn't talk about full floors. Everyone's just like, oh, no, why would we do that? It's too expensive. It doesn't make sense. So I've seen the evolution of this industry, then moving on to working at a brand, Serendipity Labs, which was a great experience for a different business model. And now I'm here at Cushman and Wakefield, Director of Partnerships and Enterprise Sales. I wear several different hats. I sit in the ecosystem of Cushman and Wakefield on the Flex team. I run a transaction team that flips transactions for our Cushman and Wakefield accounts. And I run the partnerships between Upflex, as an example, and other companies that we partner with. So thank you for your time. Excited to be here, Mike. Thank you for the invitation.
No, my pleasure. Glad to have you here. Jillian, take it away. You sit in a little bit of a different role within your organization. Can you share a little bit about that and kind of your background?
Yes, absolutely. And Mike, as you mentioned, when we first met in DC, back in 2014, I was on the operator side. So Christine, we have some similarities here. I was with Serendipity Labs at that time, and then went to work for Convene. And during those times too, with each of the operators, and working so closely together with the occupiers and seeing those shifts already and the requirements, like you said, moving from one pass, one desk, one office, to really looking at how do larger enterprise organizations utilize the space? Is it for meeting room space, drop-in space, a team hub, what have you? I came to the realization that there is so much integration and crossover between what the occupiers are looking for, and not only with the operators, but it's the technology that supports it. It's the project management, it's the utilization, all of the various different service lines within the CRE industry. So I joined Avison Young in March of 2020. So I know we're going to talk about, some of the disruptions and acceleration since that time. But the main reason I joined the group with Avison Young and the Flexible Office Solutions team was to be able to work across the sectors and verticals. So operator, occupier, and owner in a truly agnostic way. So really providing consultative advice to our clients and pulling in whether it's products, services, technology, solutions to create the best bespoke options for our clients. In doing so throughout the pandemic, it was one of those things where a lot of the large occupier clients that we've been working with, or operators or owners, Christine, this, we being in the industry for a long time, we're seeing all these different use cases and ways to really work together. I really started working with our other service lines, focusing on the end user occupiers. So working with project management, if they're looking to downsize the space, okay, what do we do with that space? Do we recreate it? And then what do we do with the other employees if we do downsize and decide to go from a 1-to-1 desk sharing ratio to a 3-to-1 desk sharing ratio? And then from tenant representation, how do we best consolidate these offerings and options that we're giving to our clients in a consolidated fashion so that they can easily digest it, and sharing across that information. So during that time, it enabled me to really, focus on, I say, the prop tech, the innovation, the data on the occupier side, and work across our service lines. So as of February this year, I moved into a role with Avison Young, working on our global occupier business development team. So that's, again, working across all service lines, all industries, one of which obviously includes Flex still today and is continuously growing.
It's so exciting and so fascinating to see how all the different firms have structured these different teams to best fit the needs of their clients, right? While also kind of helping the firms evolve into it, right? And, I always say my running joke is, Flex used to be table scraps and now it's table stakes, right? So as recently as really 2018, 2019, Flex was still kind of considered, either for startups or perhaps remote first companies that were like, smaller in nature, or quick fixes for like multinationals who just needed a very small but necessary presence in a country, either for legal reasons or just to kind of support a remote workforce. It's really interesting to see, we know that a driving force was COVID. We know that it was an accelerant, right? But we're now starting to see these ripple effects, right? Whether it be return to the workplace because remote work is maybe not working out for everyone. Maybe it's to change the portfolio long tail management for decreasing overall square footage. Jillian, I'm kind of curious to see, because you are approaching this from a different perspective, what's maybe the higher level, or what is some of the more powerful driving forces that are getting organizations to realize that they have to change a lot more than just throwing out some co-working memberships out there?
Yeah, and I think the impacts of COVID again have, as I mentioned before, vastly accelerated these disruptors within the flexible office industry. And that's everything from the products, the technology, the services, and the use cases, right? So as companies have been evaluating over the past couple of years, what do we do with our space? What's right for the space? We're looking at the utilization based upon that and our traditional real estate metrics. Here's what we need to solve for. Oh, but wait, now we're also getting employee feedback that's telling us that they don't want to come into the office 5 days a week, or they do, and it's 2 to 3 days a week. And how do we monitor and actually, control the budgets within that while ensuring we're paying attention to talent attraction, retention, and then any other of our business solutions that we're solving for. So it's, I say, taking that step back of what are the business solutions that you're solving for, right? And then when we all took those surveys early on in COVID, it's now, a lot of these organizations have had the opportunity to start collecting some of the data to see what types of spaces are employees actually using, what roles are needing which type of spaces. So I say both from that collaboration standpoint and the purpose of the spaces themselves. And then just a huge part of it is education and awareness, right? There's so much out there. So taking the time to really understand how that impacts from an HR, a legal, an IT, security, privacy to our commercial real estate needs, how do those all integrate together? And how do we make sure that Flex is tied across those? So Mike, kind of to your point, when you were saying just versus some co-working memberships, well, why are we giving those co-working memberships? Is it because employees are asking for somewhere near their home because they just need to get out of the space? Are they looking for somewhere to meet with clients? Are they looking for somewhere to meet with their colleagues? And that's, I say, the purpose of the space. And another phrase that I heard, and they said the hotelization. And they said, not in the fashion that you're selling desks and that kind of like a room situation in a hotel. But if I'm sitting at home here now in Florida, and I'm looking at, okay, my options for today are to sit at home where I've now set up my multiple screens. I have a desk, it's in my bedroom, but it works. And, I need to do some laundry today, or I can go to a flexible office space that's, a 10-minute walk away. And I know that the screens are larger. I'll have more privacy. It's going to be quiet. My dog won't be barking. I won't have my bed in the background, when I'm on video calls. What makes you assess that value and really that's worth it?
And
So
I think you hit the nail on the head, Jillian. I mean, data, right? We've been focused on, we think about it, hybrid has been a solution for many occupiers for decades. Hybrid within Flex, using Flex to support hybrid is something that many people have talked about for a long time, and many programs have existed for a long time, but the adoption and really that pendulum swinging to that, it becomes part of a portfolio strategy versus a reaction. And we're at that space where it's part of the portfolio strategy. And lucky us here, we get to help with the execution of that and different tools that we use to execute on that, which are more holistically embraced with really the workplace. We talk a lot about workplace experience. Why are people going to the office? What is their experience in the office? How do those experiences compare? You're in the desk next to me. Your day goes this way. My day goes the other way. Maybe you'll come back to that space. Maybe you'll never come back to that space. That's data that's integral to planning out what will work in the future in flex, and then how does that parlay into their traditional spaces as we work holistically within this area. We're making changes, right? It's not just in flex, it's in our traditional space too. So we're really touching everything, and flex is that integral part where we've crossed the line from, always we used to wave from the background going, we're here, we're here, we're here. And everyone was like running away from us, and now they're running towards us. So different times.
Christine, I love that. Oh, go ahead.
Go on. No, you go, Jillian.
I was just going to point out, I love that you said kind of that the utilization of that data is because, and I know, Mike, I shared this with you as well. We had a client that was talking about, they've gotten their utilization data from their traditional office spaces. And they're like, gosh, but there's just no way to get it from the flexible spaces. And we have that in, 30 to 40% of our portfolio. I'm like, oh, but wait,
right.
That does exist.
And we can help you solve it. There's a way to solve for that companies are embracing. Candidly,
I couldn't have asked for a better tee up for that. But Jillian, you were talking about kind of what the driving forces were, why an organization would consume more flex. Christine, before we jump on to the next one, I'm kind of interested to find out how has this flex product evolved to meet that need, right? Could you have, we've always laughed, this is not a new concept, right? Regis has been around since late 80s, early 90s, right? There used to be the days of the executive with the beeper that was run in to be able to dial back in and get the voicemail, right? How have you seen flex, evolve? Obviously, it's trying to evolve to meet the greater consumption, but it's just kind of interesting to see, how brokers now handle this, right? This used to be completely not of interest, right? You take care of it, and now they have to be flex enabled. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So just to give you some feedback on, why are you able to sell a pass program today and have it be successful? Think about the year, let's say 2005. What did a business center look like back then? There was no lounge, there was no common area, there's a little tiny kitchen and that old coffee pot. The evolution of the design and the influence of the changes in furniture and ergonomic furniture and different experiences that come in with monitors and Polycom, whatever it is that your specific provider uses, that has influenced the way in which providers have been able to position and sell themselves, which makes it easier for us to consume it because it's starting to more align with what people want, which is more about, I think we've learned since the pandemic, people want to be in a space where they're able to meet and collaborate. Managers are going in for a different reason, but holistically, we're seeing the trend that people want to be in a space to be with other people. They're doing heads down work at home, but they want to be in a space to be together. So the workplaces are now built to support that. And that's something we didn't see years ago. And I think from brokers who've been around for a really long time, they remember that old school office space, right? With the brown desks and the reception area, people in full suits. And then here comes WeWork with this whole brand new idea that disrupted everything. And because they didn't understand it, there was like a fear factor of it. And then all of a sudden you find out all your clients are using it. So there was that catch up phase, which I think we've now passed. And now it's more of a proactive way to, when we're asked the question from a global occupier side, we have to have a strong answer and a way to respond to support that need. And that's really our primary focus. And we do it by partnerships and collaboration. And we don't build things, we partner with people who build things to help enable our occupiers. And then from that, we extrapolate the data and we deliver it back to the broker teams who are finding insights that help them find new spaces for their clients. We evaluate what they've done, create different products from it. So hopefully that answers. I know I went off a little bit, but I get that.
No,
hopefully that makes sense.
It's just so fascinating, right? I think there's a lot of factors that go into it, right? It's the impact that WeWork has made on the industry, hate them, lump them, whatever. An impact was made. It's the advancements in technology, right? The Uberization of this world. Everyone now wants, I can get a Starbucks at a push of a button. I get an Uber at a push of a button. I want to be able to access meeting rooms just as simply. So it really is fascinating. I appreciate that perspective. You both are working on flex workspace programs, but in different capacities, right? I'm kind of curious as to how have you seen these portfolios change, right? So, just to lay the groundwork for our audience, Christine, you service Cushman's biggest and best clients, right, through the Global Occupier Services program. So you're really helping them manage not only their entire flex portfolio, but how that fits within, their real estate goals. Jillian, you're coming in from the GOS, the equivalent of GOS side. You're coming in with solutions. So I'd be interested to hear from both of you some examples or something that you've seen that might not necessarily have been hybrid work initiated, right? Something that just maybe was already in the works pre-COVID as it relates to portfolio changing. I know there's a big client, Jillian, that you all have had for a while, right? Where they were thinking about consolidation and management of their flex portfolio before COVID, right? Any maybe examples you could share with the audience as to kind of what these occupiers are thinking?
I'll just jump in real fast on that, Mike. I think what I saw and have been seeing is that there was a conversation regarding desk ratios pre-COVID. And that was something being talked about because there was technology in their traditional spaces, even going back to like light sensors underneath the desks, right? So they've been collecting data, and they were seeing that no one's space is 100% occupied at any given time ever. So there were conversations happening. How do we shift the desk ratios? What is that number? Is that number global? Can we get Asia to embrace it as well as the New York to embrace it? So those things were happening, and then COVID, for what I saw, just put it over the edge to a whole different accelerated conversation where it went from strategy to now we're in the execution phase of it.
Yeah. Jillian, anything you want to throw in there?
Yeah, and that I love that example, Christine, too, of like the desk ratios and that utilization.
That's a big one, right? We always say just because you have 50 people in Denver doesn't mean you need to have 50 desks, right? Flexibility isn't always efficiency. Go on, sorry.
Yes, and no, but that's how companies were looking at it, and maybe a 60% or 70% utilization rate pre-COVID was okay. But they just weren't paying that close attention to it. And now they're saying, well, I want 80 or 90% utilization. Okay, well, how do we get there and at the same time implement these hybrid strategies? So I think it goes back to, we're solving for these business solutions. So is it, we're looking to cut costs. We're looking to move quicker while cutting costs. We're really making a strong push on the labor attraction and retention, and how do we solve for that? Kind of correlating all those components, and then what you all were talking about earlier too, with the various different products and services that have been available or become available in the flexible office world. Again, you're seeing that technology and the platforms kind of carry over that, and how do we leverage that within our solutions, and really just the intersection of the flexible and traditional, right? Some property management or operations management is when we take a look at what these clients are solving for. And I'm sure, Christine, you're doing the same thing too. We're saying, okay, and in your portfolio and looking at each of these markets and knowing what we know about the products and solutions that could give you and meet these objections that you're looking for, it might be flex is the best option in one market, traditional is the best option in another market. And oh, guess what? You also need a hybrid solution to carry over all the others. So it's that continual adoption. And like you said, getting that data that we've now had time and will continue to be able to assess and pivot, because there are going to be more pivots. Everyone's wanting to know what's Google doing? What's Facebook doing? What are my big competitors doing? And, we can speak to that at a very high level. But again, at the end of the day, you might have very different use cases. You might have owned, real estate locations within your portfolio that maybe you want to dispose of, or guess what? Maybe you want to partner with an operator, or maybe you want to figure out how to monetize that space in a more flexible world, or kind of build that into your location.
And I think those were all taboo conversations in the past, Jillian. And now you and I will hear those talk tracks, because you see people with space that's not utilized, or they took 3 floors and now they only have, enough, they only need 1 floor, right? What do they do with that? Do we what do we do? I think that's kind of the next evolution of what we may see that come into the market to compete with, let's say, an enterprise space of a flex provider, not the hub and spoke model, not the drop-in program. But I think there's some. I think I'm working on something now, and I feel some things now that it's bubbling up, and it's
Mhm.
being more
Yeah.
embraced. And that's something that's new. That conversation never would have happened 4 or 5 years ago.
Or we might have tried or started it and
And
everyone
they,
was kind of looking at us like
like,
they are insane.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
It's funny. I always joke, for as much as we work on flex workspace solutions, all three of us, really, I spend more of my day talking about data,
Right.
how to safely collect it, how to safely process it, how to use it. I'm kind of curious as to get your opinions on this. Brokers for some time tended to be a little resistant towards flex, or maybe they didn't understand it, or they saw it as maybe a little bit disruptive or competitive. But for both of you, I know we've worked on projects. The flex is not just the solution, it's actually a new product, right? Because traditional flex reporting used to be very hindsight in nature, right? This is how much you spent this month. This is how many people, if they could even do card swipes. But now we're seeing what would, if you have the opportunity, we've got a few brokers on the line, we got a few other industry enthusiasts. What could you tell them to better embrace how to use that flex data for maybe getting more transactions? Christine, you and I have an example, right, where a client saw what utilization was for a hot desk membership program, and they've now converted into a hub. But what other ways can a broker leverage flex as a tool rather than view it as a hindrance?
I say embrace it, embrace it, embrace it, because so just to tell, so internally here, because I do not compete with brokers, I am not a broker. Our platform sits to support them, so they can lean on us to assist in helping them solve for global requirements, whereas before they were just doing something in the relevant market. So here we're talking to brokers to say, okay, so I can help you and your client set this up globally, right? And we can do these programs globally. And then you have flex team support that is in other markets as well. So I think it's an opportunity to partner internally, collect the data, and then the story will tell itself what's the next best step that you can advise your client on. So if we know that you're in a market, I think Mike, you alluded to it, we have someone now that's overutilizing a drop-in space. The data tells the story of what's right next. So when you combine that with the broker, and the broker knows the client's maybe market strategy, you marry them together, and all of a sudden he or she is in a powerful place to say, okay, well, here's where I think you need to be, and here's why. Here's the data behind it. Here's real-time data. Here's how you control the costs to help us understand this. So I think if they can all shake off the fear and embrace it. And I always tell them, I was like, advice is always free. So whatever we could do to support you, to help you enable to be smarter and flex, that's what we're building internally, which I think kind of softens it, because brokers are commission based, and no one wants to take food off of their table, right? So I think it's just a different approach. And then once they understand it and they touch it and they see that their clients, the output of it and how people are embracing it from the C-suite down, it's really changing how they think about things.
Yeah, Jillian, I'd love to you to respond, and then I got a question I'd love to dive into. We got from the audience. So, Jillian, what you're saying?
So, Christine, you spoke about just kind of that overarching. Really, it's the client first, right? We should always be looking at client first. And again, brokers, they are incentivized in a certain way, or very, very knowledgeable in their specific market or their specific, asset of space, or how they're delivering it. And, flex is here, it's not going anywhere. So again, how do we increase that knowledge and awareness, but also bring the data behind it to tell the broker that, we can help you solve for your clients' needs in San Francisco and in Denver. And guess what? In Tel Aviv and in Berlin and in Stockholm. We can do that from sitting, here in the Americas in our seat at a global level, and really bring your client that tremendous value in both the education and then de-risking and adding some flexibility to their portfolio. And guess what, broker? You're going to have that data and be able to see and understand and almost give you a little bit of a crystal ball, right? As to what are the proactive strategies and approaches that we should be assisting and bringing to this client moving forward. If we're seeing they're overutilizing the space, or guess what, you haven't touched that 20-person office that you said you so much needed. But in these areas, your employees are dropping into spaces and meeting rooms every day. So how do we shift that around?
Well, speaking about data, so we've got a question from Jamie Keller from Avison Young on the West Coast. She's asking, how many clients are allowing you to really dig in and provide this level of strategic planning? We struggle with clients being fearful or unwilling to share the data needed to help us help them. How do you overcome this?
Well, Christine, I definitely want you to answer that because I chat with Jamie all day too. But one of the things that, when I say this early on too, is a lot of times when I was speaking with occupiers and their real estate teams, I knew that they had large presence or large spends on the flexible side. I would notice within their portfolio, they weren't even addressing those or bringing those up as part of the conversation. So the first part of that is to really ask and make sure that, those aren't sitting under different financial reporting, or those groups aren't siloed so much that they're not looking at this in a more holistic fashion.
And I think I'll answer this to the broker. So the holistic ecosystem of Cushman & Wakefield has many different service lines. So when we come to the table, we're coming as a unified voice. The broker has his role, I have my role. Portfolio strategy has the role that really kicks off the client sharing most of this data. That's where things really start. So the portfolio strategy team here is working in conjunction for and with the broker and the client to come up with what is the strategy. So we do see all of that data. We also have ways to enable it with technology and platforms that are internal to Cushman that our clients use. So they're kind of when they buy us, they're buying all of us. So we are seeing that up front, and then each of us have our own individual roles. And that's really more on the global occupier side. And on the brokers, I think when I work with brokers who have multi-market led accounts, another voice who's not coming in as a broker just to talk about the industry, having lived through what I've seen, and just talking about, I have 6,000 clients, 6,000 employees right now for different occupiers using drop-in programs, and we're tracking them. So I have a story to tell that kind of eliminates any kind of fear from the client, because really, I want to enable their best strategy to work. I'm not a strategist. I don't want to create their strategy, but I will, when they have a strategy, we will enable it to be successful and monitor it.
Yep. I think it's also interesting, a little shout out, there is a shameless plug. We are hosting this webinar. So, platforms such as Upflex, we specialize in tracking that utilization data, right? So we track when people check into their hubs, whether they check into on-demand spaces. There is also a benefit to having our platform white labeled. And so one of the reasons why I was so excited to have both Christine and Jillian on here is because they work with Upflex in very different capacities, right? And so with Avison, we've got a referral agreement where we're so grateful for them to introduce our solution to their clients, right? And we're really excited to be moving forward with opportunities there. With Cushman, the relationship's a little bit more in depth, right? Cushman has white labeled our platform, and that speaks to what Christine, I believe you were saying earlier, is that you're already baked into the Cushman & Wakefield ecosystem, right? And so if you're speaking to a global occupier services client at Cushman, they already hire you for occupancy management or occupancy planning, whatever. It's easier for you to package this in, right? And so that, I think, is probably lowering the bar a little bit. The client, if they've already trusted you with this initial data, they're able to, bring you into the house a little bit more, right?
No, exactly. And so we've called it, and this is my shameless plug, it's called Cushman & Wakefield Passport. You can only get to it if you are a Cushman & Wakefield customer on the occupier side, and we're working on different things and expanding it. But it's our way to answer this ask, and to monitor really the data up front and have the controls, because we're layering so many different strategic avenues on top of that. By the time it gets to me in the flex sector, I know what I need to do and in where and what markets, which helps these programs become a little bit more successful. And now we see them, like I mentioned before, we're going back towards traditional space. So I only say, just to tell if there's any providers on here that I could just give you my opinion. I think your space should be listed in every aggregator out there. We have partnered with Upflex because of the technology and the nuances to it and what we're able to do with it and integrate it within our organization. And for the partners that I've talked to, because I also have a Flex partner network where I sign people up and I get your data. Everything's data protection. There's data protection. Someone said to me, Christine, I'm not going to work with you because you see WeWork's data. That's not reality. I want to kind of debunk some of these myths too, so that there's not this strange fear from the provider side, because it's the holistic community of these 30,000 Flex providers around the world that are really delivering the product that occupiers need. So I just, if I could bring everyone to be a part of it, if I could give my 2 cents on that.
From your lips to God's ears. So one of the things that I've been so fascinated about, we all sold Flex before COVID, right? And so a lot of those conversations, I don't want to speak for both of you, but for me, it was very technically oriented. Well, how is this app actually going to work? How is my employee actually going to get into the space, right? Now, the question I hear more often than not is not how is my employee going to physically access the space? It's how do I get my employees to even want to use space, right? And this is a little bit more predominantly focused on the North American occupier user, but I'm kind of curious as to what have you seen? How is Flex being utilized as a strategy to get employees to want to come back to the workplace, right? Are there some good ways that you've seen it done? Are there some not some good ways? I just would love to see your take as to, we've already spoken to how Flex is a solution for a bunch of different use cases, but anything in particular that strikes you of interest in how Flex is playing this type of role to get them to want to be back in and interact?
I'll give a couple of examples. One, a company that's on a platform. The reason that they wanted to take a look at that from the flexible side is to really give their employees first the optionality to utilize the space while having the visibility and the controls into the budgeting and seeing, who was using what spaces. So they said, okay, we know that the employees, based upon their surveys, has said that they want to use XYZ space. Right now, let's do a trial for 3 months. Let's take another look at it in 6 months, and let's go back and actually come to them with a plan that they now feel that they're part of, and that data as to what we need to do long term. That enabled them, because they're like, we want to your point, we want to get people back in, but like the snacks and stuff we were doing before doesn't work. We see that a lot of our employees, based on their zip codes are in this area. So we did a zip code analysis and we're like, here's some flex spaces. Let's put these on the radar for your employees. So what we ended up doing is kind of that, I know it's an overly used term, but that hub and spoke, right? To give them one core place to have their office team and have collaboration space, but 3 additional spokes to really collaborate and have meetings for some of these smaller teams in a more direct area, to their homes. And then the other piece is, the change management. So making sure that the technology is user-friendly and it's not another app, right? Because we all could be done with another app to download. But then once you get in it, really that change management and communication is vital as to here's how to use the space, here's your options, here's what we'll be taking a look at, so that employees feel empowered and also not uncomfortable, right? If I'm going to go into a space, I don't want to worry about getting in or being able to print, or are they going to have, water?
The scenario I always use is for our Unify solution. The biggest hurdle to the office I hear is the commute. Right? No one wants to schlep all the way in and then see that there's no desks available because you decided to do a 1-to-3 ratio for that hub, right? So it's also not making sure that they've got a place to be productive when they get to the space, right? But that they also know who's going to be there. Christine, do you have anything to chime in on that? Because I know we're running up. I want to get one more question in before we end up.
I just think what the great thing is about the flex sector is that so you're supporting employees who were hired during COVID, who are hired in markets based on talent, not based on where the corporate office is. So now as we're returning to the office and from the real estate perspective, they're realizing, hey, we've got 10 people in Austin. They've been successful working from home. How do we bring them to somewhere that they can collaborate together? And here's the opportunity in the flex sector to try it out, right? So you try a drop-in program, where you take an office, and it's a very low risk situation. But I think in a great way, we're supporting the new way that people are hiring too, right? You could never have been hired. Think about, 10 years ago, do you think you could ever get a job at Facebook and not be in California and San Francisco or something like that? So I think this sector, we've solved for a lot of problems that we don't necessarily give ourselves credit for, because that's really what another way that people are turning to their brokers too, to say, what do I do? I've got 3 people in Alabama. What do I don't need brick and mortar. What do I do? So just a new way of using us.
Yeah, we don't have any more questions that have come up. If you all have any other questions in these last 5 minutes, please do feel free to drop us a note. If Lorraine, if you wouldn't mind bringing up the icebreaker poll, the responses were pretty interesting to see what resources do you currently use for responding. Some of these, not surprised, right? CoStar has been around the block forever. LinkedIn is one I can testify to. I just dropped a note to someone I know in Spain saying, hey, can you help me get into an operator, because they're not answering the phone for me. Google search is not surprised. Flex Solutions Partner, on that note, I just, if you've got real estate professionals, or if you had an opportunity to speak to a real estate professional that was trying to consider what solution's best for them, because this was the largest one that was responded. We got 5 minutes left, but Jillian, Christine, what would be your number one recommendation that they need to consider when choosing a solution such as Upflex or any of the other options that are out there?
I think it's ease of use and the commitment from the company to onboard the product, to create a workflow to support it, to monitor it, and be flexible to react based on the data and not be afraid of it. And I think there's a lot of different answers out there. The company, there's a lot of, the wheelhouse is full with people, right? Pick a partner that you trust, pick a partner that's maybe been pre-vetted out, but it's got to be easy to use. Otherwise, no one's going to use it.
Yep. Jillian?
Yeah, and I'll give my shameless plug here shortly too, but I think that
Please do.
looking at those options, I would say there's probably not one of those that is going to give you all of the information or options that are out there. So just understanding that, as you're going into these, and Christine, like you mentioned, really picking what matches your needs best. And making sure that ease of utilization is great. One of the things, John Sakaitis, who's our CIO and created our Avant platform, which is real estate and real estate adjacent data, had said recently on a podcast with Jamie Russo and Giovanni, he said, their commercial real estate is great because data is everywhere. Looking at it from the end user side, that makes it very hard because data is everywhere, right? So, and then you have that human component on it. So how do you really bring that together to look at those data sources in a truly holistic way to be able to serve for it? And the other part I would say is, again, I know we brought this up, but there is so much value into getting set up on a platform or with technology, in addition to really looking at what are your standard operating procedures? What are some of the legal items or privacy items that you have to have in there? And how do we put those together so that you're able to test this? And really, again, continuously reassess and update and adapt as the future takes place.
I love it. Well, we got 2 minutes left. Any other last minute questions you might have, feel free to drop them in the line right here. Thank you both so much for taking the time out of your day to join us and to geek out with me a little bit on Flex Workspace and kind of the evolution. Hopefully anyone, if you are out there, if you've got any other questions about the Avison Young Avant program, feel free to connect with Jillian directly. If you've got questions about what the Cushman Wakefield Passport program looks like, feel free to connect with either myself or Christine. We appreciate you all taking the time to dial in here. Let's see here. I think that's about it. We're going to call it a day, because if we ask one more question, we're going to run over.
I was going to ask you, Mike, really quick, your crystal ball, or what are you most excited about or anticipating 2023 and beyond in the Flex world?
I think I'm most excited about further digging in on how different spaces are being used, not only by job function, but also by person, location, and geography. right? And so I think to what we've all talked about earlier today, Flex started out as kind of just like the basic quick fix or just for certain startups, and now it's evolved. I think as more flex space is used, we're going to have these occupiers start better understanding that creative directors use space like this, coders use space like this. I've always been a big believer in space as a service, right? Space to celebrate, space to collaborate, space to educate, space to focus. And so what's so cool is I think operators are picking up on it. We're starting to see spaces that are more oriented to task-based work, right? And we're also seeing a wide response to how in North America, for example, there are tons of usage of meeting rooms for collaboration, where in EMEA, we're seeing people use a lot of hot desking in the response to either heat waves in London with no AC or with the energy crisis with no heating this winter. And in APAC, a lot of people are back to flex workspace, maybe more of cultural. So I think people are more aware of that. That's what I think 2023 is like. Flex is standard. And now it's like, what does it look like, doing a little bit of a deeper dive. Well, thank you all so much for your time. This has been so great. As always, if you all have any questions about how Upflex can support either the co-working space you manage or the occupiers you're trying to put into workspaces, feel free to reach out to us. You know where to find us at upflex.com. Until our next webinar, we'll see you all. Until then, thanks again for dialing in.